No one on Earth was born successful. It's a journey with multiple twists and turns. These are the stories of individuals who may have gotten lost along the way, but managed to navigate back on the right track. You're listening to the Success is Learned Behavior podcast with Evan the Show.
All right, Evan the Show here, and this is Success is Learned Behavior. I have a dope guest for us today. I said for us because it's for me too, I believe. This guest, she has been featured in major publications, including, Vogue. She's a licensed clinical social worker from New York City. She's the owner and therapist of Life Intentionally Psychotherapy Services, LCSW PLLC. I know those letters are important, so you got to make sure you say it when you see them. She's also the resident therapist for nonprofit professionals of color collective through Rutgers University. She's also the host of Joy of Social Work podcast, where she discusses, her life after loss and multiple other things. And she'll talk more about her podcast when I pull her up. And she is soon to be licensed in Georgia, the state of Georgia. So she'll be licensed in a couple of different states. I'm talking about none other than Joy Brit. I'm going to pull up on the screen right now. What's going on?
Hey, Joy? How you doing?
All is well. All is well. I really, really appreciate you coming on. I've been wanting to have a conversation with you for a while, as I've been following your journey. We met through Christina.
Yep.
Because you were doing her podcast. I produced that podcast for her, and I've been following your journey. You've been extremely supportive of my journey. We go back and forth and different things of that nature on social media. So it's great to just have this talk with you right now.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. So the first question I want to ask you is, what in the world made you choose the occupation therapist?
Oh, okay. You want the long version or the short version of the story?
Give me the long version. Okay. We got time. Give me the long version.
So I feel like it's like a twofold story. So when I was in high school, my mom was diagnosed with a chronic illness called scleroderma. And so I grew up in one of those households where it was like, don't talk about what's going on at home, outside. So there was just a lot of feelings that I was having. And I started talking to a social worker at school. And so that kind of was like my introduction to like therapy, basically. Okay. And then I wanted to be a lawyer. I had no interest in being a social worker, a therapist, nothing at all. I wanted to be a lawyer. Then I was like, I don't want to go to school that long. And I also didn't get into the program. Yeah,
that's real. That's real.
I'm not trying to go to law school. But the college that I wanted to go to, there was a scholarship that I didn't get. So my mother's like, well, you're not going to that school. I ended up going to school in New York. And then I was like, well, I don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Then I got a postcard in the mail. It was basically like, do people come to you to talk for advice? Are you empathetic? Like all of these other questions. And I was like, I think this is kind of me. I went to the like informational. I took a few classes and I was like, okay, I'm going to be a human services major. Still not really like I'm going to be a therapist. I just knew that I wanted to work with people in some capacity. But then I was working at a daycare. I hated the lady that I worked with, my coworker. And I was like, how can I be here less? And I was like, I could go back to school. And I went back to school, got my master's in social work.
I love how real you are. It's like, I didn't like the lady I worked with. So,
I didn't like her. I was like,
she made me become a therapist because I knew she needed some help.
She did. We did not get along. We worked with 2-year-olds. And when it was too hot.
Terrible twos.
Oh my God. I'd be like, let's go outside. And she's like, it's too hot. I'm like, girl, we gonna sit in this room all day with them? No.
Right.
So it was like, how can I spend the least amount of time at work? And I was like, I'm gonna go get my master's.
Okay. Oh wow. Okay. So all right. Let me just back up just a little bit because I didn't know that about you and about your mom. Mm-hmm. What is it? You said scleroderma? I've never heard of that.
Scleroderma. So it's if you know about like lupus or rheumatoid arthritis, it's all kind of in the same family. So scleroderma, it also impacts people very differently. So for my mom, it started with like tightening in her skin. So like her fingers kind of got bent. And then her skin was like stretch. So like if you kind of like a reptile, I guess, kind of like stretch like that. And then it started to affect her organs. So like her lungs, her esophagus, those kinds of things started to get impacted as her illness progressed. But like Bob Saget's sister had it, Queen Latifah's mom had it.
Okay.
So but it's not very well known. Like if you know somebody who has it or had it, then you know about it. It's usually not something that folks know about. Yeah.
Okay. Is it like a terminal thing, or is it just?
I think it can. It was like it's a chronic illness, whatever.
Got you.
That,
Okay.
but it's an autoimmune disease.
Got you. All right.
Mhm.
Let me ask you this. I own a production company,
Mhm.
and I'm often asked by family and friends and whoever who thinks they're close to me to shoot for free or at a significantly lower rate,
Uh-huh.
and I want to know, because it's probably worse for you, because people don't realize that they don't value what it takes, talking to another person and how
Right.
much energy it takes and like all of the steps you have to take. How do you create boundaries so that so that you're not taken advantage of by people, or you're not undervalued
Yeah.
or anything like that? How do you create boundaries?
With like people that I know or
Yeah, with people that you know.
people that I know.
Yeah.
I was gonna say everybody respects them and I don't have to set them, but that's a lie. That's a
Oh,
lie.
okay. I'm about to say.
Nope, it's a lie. Then I started to think about some people and I'm like, oh no, it's so for me, it varies. So some people it's like telling them like, hey, don't call me before this time, don't call me after this time.
Got you.
Or sometimes it's just me not answering the phone or not responding.
Got you.
Can kind of feel a little harsh, but also that's the boundary.
Okay, all right. Because I want to know, before you became a therapist, did you
Yeah.
kind of realize, were you the go-to person for
Oh yeah.
advice and different things like that? Okay, so
I
that's a
was.
part of it as well. I guess that's a part of
Yeah.
the journey as well. You've actually experienced, I guess, tragedy or different and different life obstacles and different things of that nature. As a therapist, in my eyes, I think that you guys are healers of sorts.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I feel like you guys are healers,
Mhm.
because you take on other people's burdens and traumas and all of those things, and very much have to deal with, like like you said, the thing with your mom and different
Mhm.
things that have happened to you in life.
Mhm.
Um, how does one heal themselves in your position?
It's a great question. I go to therapy because
Hmm.
even though I am a therapist, I can't do the work for myself. I still can't, like, even with the tools that I have and I can teach somebody else. I don't necessarily always use that on myself. So sometimes I need to hear it from somebody else. Um and I would say I have a really good support system. So I can like lean on my friends and talk to them about the stuff. But they're also not my therapist. So
Right.
they're a little biased when it comes to like, when your friends are trying to give you support, they're not that your therapist isn't looking out for your best outlook, but it's different. It's just a little different. But I go to therapy because life is not always easy, and I don't know that I would be able to function all the way without some of the things that I've learned from my therapist.
Got you. Because is it easier to talk to someone that I guess isn't that close to you to get like an outside perspective? Because I know, like, when I tell my friends, they already automatically on site ready to jump on whoever the
They
issue
trying to fix it. Your friends are gonna fix it. Yeah, my therapist is not fixing it. She's like, let's talk about it. I'm like, oh, just tell me what to do.
is. More like a guide to, like, hey,
Yeah.
maybe you should think about these. And it's not even like, because at the end of the day, I'm not gonna say you don't have to listen to your therapist, but
Mhm.
it's like suggestions, and it's a professional outside opinion, because like therapists, I don't know what the in-depth study is, but you
Mhm.
guys study the brain, don't you?
Mhm. Mhm. The,
And
and depending on like where in like what your modality is. Like you study like the environment. Like what is this person's environment? What are their family? What does their family look like? Who are their supports? All of that plays a role into it too.
Yeah. And I'm in therapy as well. Well, I need to get back to doing therapy, but
Uh-huh.
I've done it, and I remember in the beginning just feeling like, yo, this is so dumb. Like this is not the issues that I'm having. Why is he asking me about this? And then like later on getting into therapy, I'm like, yo, he's brilliant. Like he took those questions to get all the way here and lead us like full circle. And now,
Uh-huh.
now I get it. So
Uh-huh.
I think I not think I know for sure like therapists have a perspective like none other,
Uh-huh.
and I definitely respect it. So
I
you
will
that
say it's such a talent in a skill, and like obviously it's learned and it's something that we have to like develop and grow. But I do
yeah.
always think it's interesting when I meet somebody and I'm like, I know why you're doing that.
Wow. Can you give me an example? Just you don't have to give no names and nothing like that. Give me an example. Give me an example. Give me an example.
Ooh. I'm like trying to make it as not specific as possible. But even so,
Okay.
no, like I know somebody who is very giving and caring and like will put everybody else's needs before their own all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I can almost guarantee you if I ask you enough questions or about your childhood and your parents, I can tell you why you do the things you do.
Mm. Joy, why are you talking about me on here? Oh man. So all right. I just want to know because you've openly discussed some experiences with loss
Mhm.
on your podcast, but you and I have never really had a in-depth conversation about it.
Yeah,
And I was wondering if you felt comfortable right now just sharing your
of
experience
course.
of loss.
Yes, I do feel comfortable.
Okay, please go ahead and
Okay.
share.
So I would, unfortunately, I feel like I've experienced a lot of loss. I would say there's like three major
We
ones.
can cover all three of them then.
Okay.
Sure. Yeah.
So, in August of 2009, my father passed away unexpectedly. So, like I said, my mother had been sick. So I kind of always mentally prepared for her to die. It's in some kind of way. I mean, like I don't think there's anything you
I
could
kind of
really
get that. I
prepare
kind
for, but you're like, I know it's going to happen. Probably you're not going to be like 90 or 100. You'll be a little younger. So I kind of always had that thought in my head, and then my dad died, and I was like, wait a minute, this was not how it was supposed to
that
be.
was unexpected. That part was
Yeah,
unexpected.
that
Yeah,
was
yeah.
unexpected.
Okay.
Because then it was also like that realization of like, I'm not gonna have parents at some point, probably soon. And
Hmm.
that was hard because I was 25 when my dad died, and then my mom died June 2011. So I was 20. It was like a few months before my 27th birthday. So I was 26. And then in 2017, my boyfriend at the time died. And I was just like, why? Why is this my life? And why does this keep happening? And that was also unexpected. He had a pulmonary embolism. I was 36 years old, so nobody expected that to happen. So
Yeah. So
yeah.
that yeah, those are traumatic, and like you said, you losing a parent period is difficult. I could imagine. I
Mhm,
haven't done that. I'm grateful that I do still have my parents right now,
mhm,
but it's I've watched my parents lose their parents,
mhm, mhm,
and
mhm.
it's a different space to even see them. Like I've never seen dad until recently when my grandmother passed away. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So it's even when you're expecting it, it still hurts. And then on top of that, you lost your boyfriend
Mhm.
at a very young age. Like, how did were you currently practicing at the time? Were you a therapist at that time as well, or was this after that?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't. I was a social worker. Worked at a high
Gotcha.
school, so I was a high school social worker. So I did have clients at the school, but not in the capacity that I see people now. But yeah, I
Okay.
mean, I was doing this work, and then I took time off work because I couldn't work. And then I remember coming back, and some of the students were super empathetic and supportive, and other students were like, I heard what happened, but like, I need you, and it's about me now. And that was when I was like, I can't work with teenagers anymore because they are evil. Like they're just not like
The evil
as,
teenagers.
as like a teenager should be. Their thought and
Right.
their focus is themselves,
And
and
they're
not that
finding
I
themselves. Yeah.
yeah, and not that I
Giving
needed
selfish.
them to take care of me, but I also knew I didn't have capacity to be there for them in that same way.
That is huge. And that's
Yeah.
a lot of people need to be honest with themselves with that. It's just like, hey, I kind of gotta, make a different change for myself.
Yeah.
Like I know I'm helping them out, but I'm just pouring, where, this could be detrimental to my mental health.
Right.
Um,
Like yeah, like I'd go to work and I worked like 7:30 to 4, and I would get to work and by like 9 o'clock sometimes I'd tell my friend like I need to go outside and take a walk. And she'd be like, okay. Because everybody was super supportive. But then I'm like, now I'm not even here. I'm just outside. Not all the time, but like enough of the time that it was like it was really hard. It was really hard to
yeah.
get back into work. And at that point, I think I realized that I probably didn't really grieve either of my parents. And so now it's like it just feels very heavy and like a lot of loss.
Okay. What is that process look
Mm,
like for you? Like
yeah.
the grieving process, because all of those are, some really important people to lose.
Mhm.
What did that process look like for you, in terms of your journey to healing?
Yeah. Um, that's a great question. And it's so like part of me is like, I don't even know. So I would say in the beginning with my parents, I think it was just, well, with my dad, it was very much like, well, like take days off, go to a funeral, help my mom with the things that she needs help with, but I got to go back to work and I'm in school. I was in grad school at the time. So it just kind of felt like got to keep going. And then I also have parents who are very much like, you can't take too much time off work because you're gonna like get fired. And so they didn't teach me that I needed to take that space. So it was kind of just like back in motion. And then my mom started to get really sick. And so it was like, how am I balancing how I feel about my dad? My mom is getting sicker. So I'm knowing like she's probably gonna die soon. I work full time. And at the time I was working at an adolescent health center. So and so sometimes it was just like kids there or young people there for birth control, but sometimes it was like young people there and I have to tell them they're HIV positive. So it was also like heavy work that I was doing at the time. It was
Yes.
and I'm in grad school trying to learn how to be a social worker. All of these things are going on at the same time. So I think I just kind of like pushed through. And then when my mom died, it kind of hit me and I took I want to say almost a month off of work. And then my job was like, you have to come back or you're going to lose your job. And I was like, oh, it's so heavy. And I think I worked for another month and then I quit.
Wow, that's like super insensitive of them to do something like that
Oh,
too, because
yeah.
it's just like people grieve differently. So it's just like, hey, after them 3 days, you need to come back, or we're gonna have to find somebody else.
Which
That's
is ridiculous. Who is
yeah,
okay in 3 days?
no, I have no clue.
Yeah.
I have
So
no
with your parent, I mean, I think even if you don't have
parent.
a relationship with your parent,
Yes.
that it is that your parent is gone now, this,
Mm.
you still have to process that.
That's an interesting. Yeah, I guess you do, because it's the person that is responsible for your creation and like you
Yeah.
being here. And you're right, because I know a couple of people who have lost their dad or mom that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't in their life,
Mm-hmm.
and they cried just as if they've been with that person their entire life, or they were
Yeah.
raised by them.
And for
Oof.
some people, it might be harder because you're also now grieving that relationship that you'll never be able to have.
See that I wasn't even thinking that way. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, uh, I'm sorry I cut you off, but
It's okay. No, you're
the
good.
yeah, the process, now healing with the loss of your boyfriend. How
Right.
what did you do there?
So it was so in the very beginning, it was taking time off work. It was really kind of like whatever I felt like doing in that moment, whether it was like I'm not getting out of the bed or I'm gonna like go spend time with friends or like let people come over and spend time with me. It was kind of just like, what do I feel like in this moment? And being very honest with what I felt like in the moment. And sometimes it was like, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to talk to anybody. Like, I'm alive, y'all. But I also had developed like this really bad, like my anxiety, like I would say I hadn't really had anxiety until that moment. And so then I was like constantly feeling like I was gonna die. It was a lot. So for me, it was like I have to get into therapy. I have to get back into therapy because I hadn't done therapy in some years, and I would say like my first experiences weren't even all that great. So I was like, I want to get back into therapy. I want a black therapist. I was like very intentional about that.
Okay.
Um, and then I also switched jobs at some point because again, like love these teenagers, but I can't give them what they need. And I didn't know. I'm sure at some point I might have been able to, because like
Okay.
obviously I work with adults. I work with adults now and some teenagers. But in that moment, I was like, I can't give y'all. So I switched jobs. And I was also very honest with my new employer. Like, this is what my life is like. I
Right.
might need days off. I don't play about like if I'm not feeling good, I'm not coming to work. I will take it like I will call out and take a
That's
mental
so
health
important.
day.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um so it was really like being honest with myself. And then that's when one of my friends was like, you should start a podcast because I feel like you have the story that I think other people could learn from or heal from or get something from. And so then that started. And then that became like a huge part of my healing.
Wow. Oh, so, okay. So, like sharing your pain with others, it was like basically the journey to you healing now.
Yeah. And
Wow.
for me, it felt less in the beginning, it felt less about sharing it with others because I was like, no one's going to listen to this. So it was just like getting it out, like in a place where if it wasn't coming out in therapy, and also like I think sometimes being a therapist and in therapy, you have and you know that it's not true, but you still have these like, is my therapist gonna think that something's wrong with me and tell me I shouldn't be a therapist or like I shouldn't they're gonna like get my license taken away. I kind of had some of those thoughts. So there were
Ah,
things that with that therapist at least I didn't go as into depth with as I could, and my podcast felt like a space that I could say whatever I wanted to.
okay. Yeah, that it's interesting that you say that because it's just like um I feel like in life a lot of times we go through difficult things and it almost seems like I don't know. Tell me if you could disagree with me. It's fine,
Mm-hmm.
but it seems like we go through things a lot of times in life to help other people,
Mm-hmm.
and I very much feel like I don't want to say that's the reason why you had loss or anything like that, but I very much feel like your podcast absolutely helps people and the work that you're doing helps people.
Mm-hmm.
So that might be the reason. Do you feel like that's part of the reason that you've been going through all of this or you've gone through all of that?
Yeah, it's one of those things like I really agree with, but I hate that I agree with it because again, like I don't I
That's
wish
such
like
a phenomenal answer.
yeah, like I wish like nobody had to go through any of these kinds of things and these
Right.
experiences, but I do know that they have made me who I am. And
Oof.
it's like it sucks.
Yeah, it really does. Because I mean, nobody wants to deal with tragedy, but it like the way you even discuss it and things like that, like the way you talk about, your mom passing and stuff
Hmm.
like that. It's not like I won't say you're like over it, but it just seems if to me it seems like you've healed.
Hmm.
Would you say you've healed?
Yeah, yeah, and I think like that can look different because I think sometimes now I can talk about it without crying and being like, well, now
Got
that
you.
I've had this conversation, I can't do anything for the next 6 hours.
Got you.
But there's still times and moments that it's like I like want my mommy. I was telling that to my friends the other day. Something
Hmm.
was going on, and I was like, sometimes I just like want my mommy. Like I don't want to do any. I don't want to be an adult. I just want my mom to like fix it and take care of it and like make me a doctor's appointment or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Um. Oh, I really, really, I appreciate you just sharing those personal things about yourself. And I do think like the people that watch it or listen to this, however they're going to listen to it, they're
Mhm.
definitely going to um become better or head in the right direction of healing. You know what I mean? So
Mhm.
I definitely appreciate you sharing that.
Thank you.
Let's on a brighter note.
Okay.
I
Mhm.
deem you in my eyes as this is success is learned behavior, so we do have to talk about success.
Okay.
Um, to me, you appear to be successful. Do you
Okay.
think you're
Thank you.
successful?
I do. I do. I do. I think that that's because I feel like I've personally changed what I thought success meant.
Oh,
And that,
okay.
yeah. So I
Yeah,
think I
that's
used to
perfect.
think
Okay,
success
yeah.
was like I'm a billionaire and I have a private jet or something like that. And I'm like, don't have that. But I feel like I have peace, I have support, I have like health,
Right.
I got a few dollars.
Right. You got a little slow
A
change, right?
little bit. But I also feel like I've like impacted people and I'm the work that I'm doing is my purpose. And so I feel like that makes me successful.
Wow. And I think I mention it in every single episode. Everybody's definition of success is different. And we just have to learn what it is exactly
Mhm,
because it may not be a whole bunch of money.
mhm,
That I feel like success and like our, I guess, what would you call it? We have to satisfy that burning desire, whatever it is. Like it could be knitting sweaters, or it could
mhm.
be something like just some people just want to raise their children. Some
Yeah,
people just want to work a job. Some people want to be entrepreneurs and all of that stuff, and we just have to find our personal definition of success, and
exactly.
it doesn't match everybody's definition doesn't match.
Right.
They may be very similar, but they're not identical.
Mhm.
Um, so with that being said, what's your personal definition of success
Ooh. For me or for
for
everybody?
you?
For
Yeah,
me.
normally I ask like a general statement, like what success, but I want to
Yeah.
know what your personal definition of
Yeah.
success.
Success to me is living in your purpose, having peace, and making an impact.
Ooh. Can you say that just one more time?
Success is
Bars.
living in your purpose, having peace, and making an impact.
Oh man. I think that's going to be the title of this podcast. This episode, that's going to be the title. That's definitely going to be the title. Wow.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So with that definition, so let's go
Okay.
back a little bit. Just one
Okay.
question. With that definition you just gave, do you still deem yourself as successful?
I do.
Perfect.
I
That's what
do.
I'm talking about. Now, Joy, please tell everybody how they can get in contact with you, how they can listen to your podcast, and all of those
Okay.
beautiful things. Go ahead.
So you can follow me on Instagram at the Joy of Social Work, Joy with an I. And my podcast is also called The Joy of Social Work, and you can find that on all podcast platforms.
Perfect, perfect. Thank you so much for spending this time with
Thank
us.
you.
To you that are watching, I'm Evan the Show. This is Success is Learned Behavior. Follow me at Evan the Show all across the board. That's EVANTHESHOW. Or you can follow Silb Brand, SILB Brand, BRAND on Instagram or successislearnedbehavior.com. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Be great.